going to get started. So, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be going over inspections, education, public affairs. If you don't know me, I'm Bosn, Kittrell, currently the CEO of Station Marblehead, Ohio. Done a couple of these lives before, so just going to get started right away. Feel free to ask questions as I'm going along, and if I'm going too fast, feel free to let me know. I'll be watching the comments. Kind of looking to my right here because I'm reading off my computer screen over here, so don't mind me, but I'll be checking back over to my left and reading your guys' comments. So I'm going to start off with the inspections and go right down the list here. So first thing I want to talk about is the AIA program, which is the Assessments, Inspections, and Audits program. A lot of people don't know about that, but what it is initially it was started as a 5-year program, which was a bunch of people at Forcecom and other programs that got together to go through all the different inspections and see what was redundant and what kind of didn't have a high risk or what could be removed. Several different inspections were checking the same thing over and over again, and as you know, you guys probably felt this, where you feel like, okay, all we do is get inspected, and prepare for inspections, and it takes away from our ability to actually go out and do the operations. So this program was designed to kind of take some of that pressure off of us and to allow us to do the operations. But inspections are still important to make sure that we're, number one, standardized, and number two, that we're completing the mission safely and effectively. So with the assessments, assessments are techniques used to perform a review of a process or a program in order to conclude on effectiveness, efficiency, or compliance. An inspection is an examination, observation, measurement of testing and judgment to evaluate performance levels or attainment of standards, and an audit is an independent, systematic examination of a program element, process, and records to determine the propriety, effectiveness, and adequacy of programs, systems, and operations that require corrective actions to non-conformance findings. So as a result, the biggest thing that we saw as BOSA-mates and OICs was the 3-year program from STAN and RFO and from the 2-year program. So we got the self-assessment out of that. Another big thing that we saw as OICs and as BOSA-mates is the 2-year OSI program. So we went to the 1 year. You get the gunner's mates come down and do the OSI inspection. The following year you do a self-inspection. And then of course with the STAN, followed by RFO, followed by the self-assessment. So I want to kind of dig down into the self-assessment for the STAN and RFO a little bit more. I want to talk about who can do the self-assessment and what that requires. So in order to do the self-assessment, you need to designate your self-assessment team in writing as the OIC. And that self-assessment team needs to consist of at least 1 BOSA-mate and 1 machinery technician. And in order to designate those people, they must be certified on all the platforms at your unit. So you can't just randomly pick somebody. If your XPO or your EPO is newly reported and they're not certified on your platforms, you cannot put them on your self-assessment team until they have certified on your platform. So make sure you're keeping that in mind. Those are some questions you might be asked on your board. So and you can also, if you don't have people, or if all your people that are currently certified aren't high enough ranking, you can designate them from an outside unit. So one of your neighboring stations, if you don't have them, maybe if you want to designate their XPO or their EPO or even the OIC from there until you have those people designated and qualified at your unit. That memo can be on your collateral duties and assignments memo, or you can do a separate memo altogether. There's also a template on the Boat Forces STAN team website that you can use to designate those people. So what is the cycle for STAN for the 3-year cycle? So remember, it goes STAN team, then the following year you have the RFO, and then the 3rd year you have the self-assessment. So make sure you know the order of that. The RFO assessment needs to be completed between 10 and 14 months after the last STAN inspection. And then that inspection should mirror the STAN inspection except for the written test. And then also it is recommended that when stand team comes, representatives from RFO are on board at your station or when that's going on. And then remember that the RFO is there to assist you, so even when you're doing your self-assessment, if you want RFO to come down and assist you through it, that's definitely recommended, and they're there to support you. So just this year we did our self-assessment at my station, and the 29 was a new platform for us this time, so I asked the sector RFO team to come down and inspect one of our 29s just to help my inspection, our self-assessment people. So I have my EPO designated, and then my XPO designated as our self-assessment team, but since it was the first time that we were inspecting a 29, we asked the RFO team to come down and do the first assessment on the first 29 and go through that with them. And then also, because we have it's a large unit, large RNS program, I asked them to come down and go through the RNS program, and I have a new BM1 that it was his first time going through the program, so I wanted to make sure that we had a good set of eyes on that program. So feel free to ask them. That's what they're there to do. And then remember that RFOs are also conducted on small cutters, anything that are 175 feet or length and less, as well as you're going to have this small cutter TISTA. So we'll kind of go on the small cutter TISTA here in a minute, a little bit further, but the self-assessment, as far as the RFO, needs to be conducted within 10 to 14 months prior to the stand team inspection. So stand team does a really good job of posting their inspection schedule on their website. I'll show you that here in a second when I get onto that website here. And then once you do your self-inspection, you need to do a template, which is on the stand team website, and produce your memo. It will look just like your stand team memo looks, just like the RFO memo looks. And then you need to route that memo up your chain of command, just like any other memo would do. And then you need to keep that on file, because one of the check sheets items is, are you maintaining those reports on file? If you're looking for that template, it's right on the stand team website. So, all right, so small cutter TISTA, kind of mentioned that before. In fiscal year 18, they started with the small cutter TISTA, which is handled by the Fleet Training and Readiness Branch in a float training organization, which they started using the CART TISTA cycle. And I'm going to switch my phone around here. Give me a second. I can figure this out. Hopefully you guys can see my computer screen here. And right on their website here, the FCA ATO website, you can access all of their check sheets. Hopefully you guys can see all this. And then what it kind of looks like is it'll take you to this thing right here. You got to make sure that your macros are enabled. It'll give you a little pop-up right in this area. Right in this area. So make sure you enable the macros. And then you're going to choose your cutter size. All of your OIC cutters are going to be down here on this bottom line. So choose the one you want. I don't know, I clicked an 87 one. And then it'll come up here. So here's your DC one. And then you'll go through here. And this is basically everything they're inspecting for DC for an 87. You can also use the master checklist, which is going to have all of them, but then it gets a little bit crazy here because then you have all the cutter sizes. So it's a lot easier to go through it the way that I just showed you, but it'll pull it all up. Same thing with your stand team. Right here is the stand team report template. Right from the 731's website, you can get to the stand team site, and everything you're going to need here. All of their inspections that they go through. Right here's the check sheets that they use. This is what you should be using for your self-inspection. And then here's the template, just updated 22 May. And then this is what you should be routing and then keeping on file for your inspection. So, is there any questions on any of this so far? Am I going too fast? All right. All right, so some other things, some other inspections that you're going to see at your units are the clear inspections. When you're inspected for the clear is every 24 months. Basically, that's your comprehensive law enforcement. It's a proficiency. They're going to go through all your LE equipment. They're going to have all your LEIs, assess their ability to deliver training. The big things that they see on that is improper gear, and then a lot of people get hit on the BUI stuff and their ability to do the BUI enforcement. So all that check sheet stuff, again, is available on the MLEA's website. So Steven says, in March of 2018, update to Boat 1. Under OPCON responsibilities, ensure at least one member of the RFO team accompanies the Boat Forces Stand team for the duration of the Boat Forces Stand inspection of subordinate units. This ensures the operational commander has a representative on site and provides professional development to members of the RFO Stand and tracks this on their memo. Okay. So one thing I want to say is, like, all of these inspections, the answer sheet is given to everybody. So if you go to all these different websites that I'm kind of pointing out to you and pull all these and you do a self-inspection, you give it to all the people that are running these programs, there's really no reason that you're not doing well in these programs. And, you know, your XPO's keeping a good tab on all this stuff throughout between all the inspections, then your program should be running well and you should have a good pulse on what's going on at your unit. So the answer sheet is given to you. There's no reason that it should be a surprise that anything is going on at your unit when the inspection team comes. So let's see. All right, so then I kind of mentioned the OSI a little bit. So the OSI was moved to a biannual program. So the self-assessment needs to be completed within 10 to 14 months of the OSI that was completed by your cognizant sector, and then make sure that that's sent off to, it doesn't just go to your sector, it's actually sent off, so make sure that you're sending that off. And there's, if you get on the portal, you can find out where it's sent off to, so. And it's also on the inspection check sheet. So, then the other inspection you're going to see is your FSAT for your galley, if you have a galley or a dining facility. So that's every 2 years. One thing that's kind of significant about the FSAT is if you think that something's going on with your galley, or if you're not really sure, you can always request a FSAT inspection at the COIC's request. FSAT's really great. They do a really good job of really helping COs, OICs, and your FSOs, especially if you have a new FSO, never been an FSO. You know, if you're on an 87 or something, you have an independent duty FSO. And as you know, BOSA mates, if you're not really sure what's going on, they're a great resource. So don't be afraid to reach out to FSAT. They're out there and available. So then you have the SMART inspection, which is safety and environmental health inspection. It's for any cutter that's less than 200 feet in length in all shore units. It's required every 3 years. It goes hand in hand with the USAT, which is Unit Safety and Assessment Tool, which is required annually. So I'm going to show you, turn my phone around here. So every unit's required to have their USAT done annually, like I said. You get to it from the Hiswell website, and basically you go right here, you can look up by the OPFAC, and you can see where your unit's at for the year. The shore check sheet is right here. If you're on a cutter, it's right here. Usually your EPO should be managing this, but if you want to see where you're at for your unit, you can just enter unit's OPFAC right here, hit the go button. It'll bring up your unit's current status. And again, this USAT is due annually, so make sure that, you know, you're doing this annually. And then it's a pretty lengthy check sheet, so it's a good idea to break it up and, you know, do a section, you know, a couple sections each quarter or a couple sections each month or whatever. And then when you get your SMART inspection every 3 years, they'll look at it and make sure that you're doing it. A lot of people will do the assessment, but then they forget to close it out at the end of the assessment. So don't forget to go in there and close out the assessment at the end of the year. That will be a gig on your inspection. So Um, any questions on that? All right. That's really all I wanted to hit on inspections. So if there's no questions on inspections, I'm going to move into education. Education's a small one, so. So big things with education is who can be designated as an ESO. Anyone who is an E7 or above. And remember that you actually have to be designated in writing by the sector commander as an ESO. You're not just automatically deemed as an ESO just because you're the OIC of the unit. What test can you administer as the ESO? You can administer the DWINTO, which is your Deck Watch Officer Original Test, the renewal for the Deck Watch Officer, your SAR Funds test, the MLE end of course test for the BOBC course, and then depending on if you have access and whatnot, you can administer Dante's courses or QMP or any other end of course tests if they come back online, but currently there are none of those. So additionally, if you are E9 or above, you can get your unit designated as a service-wide exam unit, but you have to actually be designated as a service-wide exam unit, and then you can administer service-wides. But again, you have to be E9 or above and be designated as a service-wide exam unit. What's the wait time period between tests? 21 days. So if someone takes a test and they fail and they want to come back and take it again, they need to wait 21 days. That's an all Coast Guard end of course test. Current fiscal year 19 tuition assistant caps. Tuition assistants will fund 100% of the tuition costs, not to exceed the following caps: $250 per semester hour, $166.67. I didn't see that, Nick. Thank you. $166.67 per quarter hour, and the new annual cap for tuition assistance for fiscal year 19 is $2,500. So Nick says that there was a message this week canceling EPME and a course test forever. So good to know. And then also there's lifetime caps on tuition assistance, which a lot of people seem to miss this question. I like to ask this question on boards. So lifetime caps are first associate's degree, first bachelor's, and first master's degree, or 130 semester hours for an undergraduate degree, or 40 semester hours for graduate degrees. So that means if you join the Coast Guard and you already had a bachelor's degree, the Coast Guard's not going to pay for you to get a second bachelor's degree. If you already had an associate's degree, they're not going to pay for a second bachelor's degree. That's a good question, Chief. So Chief asked how long, like if as the OIC, if I'm due to take my DWO test, how long do I need to get rid of it? That's actually not a relevant question anymore, Chief, because it's on the LMS. So because I don't actually hold on to the test, I just need to go to a separate ESO and have that administered. It used to be when we had like the actual test on board that we had to get rid of it for a certain amount of time before I could take the test. I couldn't have access to the test to like study it and then go take it. But now that it's all electronic and in LMS, there's no requirement for me to get rid of the test as the ESO since I don't have access to the test on the regular basis. The only way to get into the test is to log into LMS and then have someone put in their user ID and password who's an ESO. Carl, to my knowledge, there's no longer library units. Everybody's a non-library unit because everything went online to LMS. When I say LMS, that's the learning management system. I could be wrong on that, but every unit that I'm aware of is a non-library unit and everything is on LMS. If anybody knows anything different, please correct me because that's the only thing I'm aware of. I don't know if there's somebody that knows better than I do. But back to the a lifetime cap, so if you've already had a bachelor's degree and you want to get another bachelor's degree, it doesn't matter if the Coast Guard paid for the first one or not. They're not going to pay for a second bachelor's degree. If you already had a master's degree, whether the Coast Guard paid for it or not, they're not going to pay for another one. But if you use tuition assistance and got an associate's degree or got a bachelor's degree, they will then pay for a higher level degree. So you can use tuition assistance again to obtain the higher level degree. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody. So what is required to receive tuition assistance? Once you've completed 6 credit hours, you need to make sure that you have uploaded your degree plan into the system, and that you have completed the tuition assistance counseling worksheet. And that counseling worksheet is that worksheet that says, yes, I'm actively, pursuing my qualifications. I am doing everything that my commands ask me to do, and your supervisor signs it, and then your OIC signs it, saying that you're good to go. A couple other questions that I've seen asked, or that I like to ask about education, is what's the Coast Guard Mutual Assistance Supplemental Education Grant? And that's a program that offers financial assistance by reimbursing certain costs associated with seeking a college degree that aren't paid by tuition assistance or other programs. And currently the cap on that is $500 per calendar year. Sometimes near the end of the year, they'll run out of money and there will be a message that says, hey, this is shut off for the year. So pay attention to that, but currently it's at $500. And then advanced education programs, are they available to enlisted members? And yes, they are. And look into that, because there's certain programs that are available, such as like culinary arts degree for CSs, healthcare administration degrees for HSs, business administration and management degrees for yeomen, etc., stuff like that. So usually if that question's asked, they'll say, hey, name me a few or whatever. And then also know the window for when tuition assistance needs to be entered and approved by. So that's at least 14 days before the class conveyance date and no more than 90 days before the class conveyance date. Any questions on tuition assistance, or I'm sorry, education? Okay, I'm going to move on. Public affairs. All right, so there's a public affairs manual. It's Commandant Instruction 5728.2. Usually, all 3 of these sections that I'm covering tonight, there's not a lot of time for a lot of questions in here, but there's a lot of important information in all 3 of these. So I'm going to try to cover as much out of the public affairs manual as I can that's relevant to you as an officer in charge. So in Chapter 1, it talks a lot about what is important for you to know and what your responsibilities are as an officer in charge. So straight out of Chapter 1, it says public affairs is a key function of each command. The most important people conducting the public affairs program are commanding officers and officers in charge. Their daily interaction with the community and media and the guidance they provide to personnel assigned to their units from the basic public perception of the coast form the basic And the guidance they provide to personnel assigned to their units form the basic public perception of the Coast Guard. Commanding officers and officers in charge are responsible for conducting a unit-level public affairs program that includes media, internal, and community relations activities. Coast Guard requirements of unit PA programs are the same as those districts. However, unit commanding officers must determine the extent to which they are able to conduct their own program. The functions listed under Area District PA programs should be used by unit COs as a guide, not as a requirement. And then it continues to say that unit OICs have the closest association with the communities in which they work and live, and a strong community relationship program at the unit level is a critical element in maintaining the working relationships necessary to perform our missions. So if you continue on in the manual, and go into Chapter 2, it talks about what you can and cannot release. So does anybody know what the what the general message or general guidelines are for public affairs in the Coast Guard. Anybody that's not a current CO or OIC. Like, what's the goal? Anybody? Okay, maximum disclosure with minimum delay. So, what can you release? So, there you go. Chief got it correct there. Sorry if I didn't give you the time on that. I know there's a delay here. But maximum disclosure with minimum delay. So you can release just about anything with few exceptions. The Coast Guard will answer all questions quickly and accurately. You will find more information on the exceptions later in Chapter 2, but it's the general policy of the Coast Guard to release the names of individuals rescued by the Coast Guard before a case is closed. What about after a case is closed? Can you release names from someone after a case is closed? So, SAR case is closed, can you release the names of survivors? Anyone? Okay, I got a couple no's. That's the correct answer. You cannot release their names after a case is closed. How is that information obtained if someone wants to obtain that information? Chief Turner, good job. So through a Freedom of Information and Privacy Act's request. So before a case is closed, we can release it. But after the case is closed, we have to abide by the Freedom of Information Act request. So other things to keep in mind when we're releasing information. Give me some examples of other things that we should keep in mind. Things that we shouldn't release. Anybody? George, we're going to talk about that in a minute. That's not necessarily correct. We'll come back to that one. We'll talk about that too, George. Not what I'm looking for here, but good guesses. Things that we specifically cannot release is what I'm looking for. All the things you guys are saying now are things we're going to touch on, but I'm looking for things that we specifically cannot release. So what you guys are giving me are all good. You're correct. We shouldn't speculate. We shouldn't give our personal opinions. Those are all good good things when we're talking to the media to not do. But I'm looking for specific things that we are prohibited from releasing to the media or to the general public. Any other guesses? All right, so we shouldn't release anything that's classified information, anything that's LE sensitive, and anything that violates a person's personal privacy or interferes with a judicial proceeding. All right, Jay got it right there with PII. So again, anything that violates a person's personal privacy, hampers law enforcement operations, classified information, or interferes with a judicial proceeding. Does that make sense? Everybody following? Okay. What can you not withhold? So what can you not withhold? Anyone? Bueller? All right, so sometimes you might have information that might make the Coast Guard or make us look bad. And that's not justification for withholding or covering up acts that will probably make the situation look worse. If you are worried about how to handle a bad news situation, contact higher authority and never lie. You may delay your response, however, while you contact higher authority for guidance. So, never lie, never try to hide something that might make us look bad, and if you're unsure of how to handle the bad news, reach out for further guidance, and just simply say, hey, I'm going to have to get back to you while I reach out for higher direction or guidance, and then reach out for higher guidance. All right, so remember, when speaking to the media, you should know your job, speak confidently and authoritatively on what your command does, both how and why, get an understanding of what the news media wants from you. It's always fair to ask them the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Ask them the questions that they're going to ask you before you go on the news. It's completely appropriate to say, hey, what are you going to ask me so I can prepare? Build your own personal credibility. Build your reputation as being open, frank, and honest. The most successful outcomes result after you've earned the trust and the respect of reporters. Remember to stick to the facts. Don't speculate. It's completely okay to say, I don't know, but I can find out. But make sure that you follow up with the reporter. Don't ghost them. Again, don't speculate and don't give your opinion on anything. And be wary of any hypothetical questions. All right, so the big no-no is don't ever use the words no comment or any similar expression to the press. The public is accustomed to hearing those words from people that are trying to hide the truth. So there are only 3 acceptable answers to any question. Number 1, the answer is straightforward, factual, with any explanation that is appropriate. 2, I don't know, but I'll find the answer and get back to you promptly. Then make sure you get back to them promptly. Or 3, I don't know, but I know, but I can't tell you because of X, Y, and Z, and explain which statements, such as the investigation is still ongoing, or that touches on classified issues that I cannot discuss, etc. And then never lie to the media or the public, period. All right, so can you allow news media on board your unit and or embark them on board a vessel or aircraft? Anybody want to answer that? Okay, so I got a couple yeses. That is correct. Are there any limitations to that? Okay, Jeff says with approval. Jeff, who do you think you need approval from? Okay, Tim says with permission. Who do you need permission from? Why do you guys think you need permission? Or like, you're the OIC. Who are you calling for permission from? Can you give him permission? They want to come and do a a story about life jackets. Do you think you need permission to have the media come on and do a story about life jackets? So Carl says he would let his boss know, but it's his decision to do it. Okay? Anybody else? Carl, are you saying that just to let him on board your unit, or are you saying to take him out on a boat ride? Okay, so Jake says let him come on board the unit, but always smart to touch base with your public affairs office. Okay, Jeffrey says reach out to the local PA support and have them there as well. There's like 2 PAs in the district office, Jeffrey. Good luck getting them to come out to your unit. Depending on how far you are from them or how close. Good luck. Anybody else? All right, so the answer is yes. You can have them on board your unit. You can take them out on a boat ride. You don't need to request anybody's permission. You are absolutely allowed to take them out on your boat. It is a good idea. I would let your response chief know, hey, I'm taking the media out there, whatever. We're going to do a news story on this or whatever. Hey, we had this big STAR case. This is going on with the media. Of course, you want to follow any security protocols that you normally have for your unit, check IDs, whatever it is. There are a couple of limitations with that. Any reality TV show or documentary or motion pictures that are not news media, that needs to be ran through the District Public Affairs Office and through the Coast Guard Motion Picture and Television Liaison Office. So anything that's just, standard news media, hey, we had this big SAR case, hey, I want to do, a piece on boating safety, hey, we had this big, law enforcement case or whatever it was that you want to talk about, absolutely, if that's newsworthy and you want to put a press release out and you want to invite the news on board or the news shows up at your gate, you're absolutely allowed to do that. You don't need to run any of that through the public affairs office, the sector, the district, or anything like that. You can do that. That is totally up to you as the OIC. Just make sure that you're comfortable with it. They're your boats. Take them out on the boat. Totally up to you. But if it is a reality TV show, documentary, motion picture, that does need to be ran through the Public Affairs Office and eventually through the Coast Guard Motion Picture and Television Liaison Office. So that's the one exception. So just remember that. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about releasing some names of missing civilians in overdue SAR cases. During searches for overdue vessels, try to release the names as soon as possible. Releasing the names can actually have a positive effect for the Coast Guard, to where people who are overdue may not actually be overdue, and they will actually, there's been cases where they've actually reached out to the Coast Guard and said, hey, I'm not overdue, I'm safe, I'm good, so that's good. Let's see. All right, so names of civilians in distress cases during searches for people who are known to be in distress. Release names only when you are reasonably certain that the next of kin notifications have been notified. If you haven't been able to make next of kin notifications, or if SMC hasn't been able to make those notifications, you should release the names only after a reasonable amount of time has passed. And does anybody know what they classify as a reasonable amount of time to try to make next kin notifications? Anybody want to take a stab at that? I'll turn my light on in here. Stephen's pretty close. All right, 6 to 12 hours. So if you've tried to make next of kin notifications and 6 to 12 hours has passed, then at that point you can release names. All right, so someone had asked a question earlier about releasing names of survivors and names of deceased. If you've already released the names during the search and bodies are later found, you can release the fact that victims have been sighted or recovered but have not yet been positively identified. Do not release the names of survivors until positive identification has been made and names of the dead and injured have been released by local authorities. All right, so we kind of talked about releasing names earlier of survivors. So just a little bit further on that, withholding names upon request. It is the policy of the Coast Guard to release the names of individuals rescued by the Coast Guard before a case is closed. After that point that they've been rescued by the Coast Guard, any request for those names must be requested under the Freedom of Information Act. However, we can let the survivors know that people would like to speak to them, but we can't pressure them into talking to the news or the media. So we could just let them know, hey, the news is interested in your story. No pressure, but here's the information of the news if you'd like to reach out to them. Let's see. Another thing you want to keep in mind is when we talk about don't speculate, be careful that a reporter doesn't try to put words in your mouth. Don't say things like the captain decided to abandon ship. Don't say things like if they're out there, we're going to find them. Don't make false promises or empty promises. Don't talk about things that we talk about in general. Probability of detection, 90% probability of detection. This suggests that the Coast Guard puts a numerical value of life. Just kind of avoid that topic in general. And then another big question that's asked on a lot of boards is, what is SAP? So I'm going to leave you guys to answer that if anybody wants to take a stab at that. The acronym SAP. Anybody? All right, Chief Turner got it. Security, accuracy, policy, and propriety. So a lot of times you're going to get asked the follow-on question to that is, what is propriety? So I'll just go over each of those 4 definitions real quick, right out of the manual here. So releasing information that violates Coast Guard security policies is prohibited. All information released by Coast Guard personnel must be verified for accuracy prior to release. Stick to the facts and avoid speculation. No information released by the Coast Guard personnel should violate service or command policy. For example, certain personnel information about members may not be released because it would violate the member's privacy. And all information released by the Coast Guard personnel will meet acceptable standards of propriety. All right, and then the last thing I want to talk about is found in Chapter 11 of the Public Affairs Manual, which discusses social media. So social media tools offer direct two-way engagement with the American taxpayers, which allows us to listen to our constituents and consider both feedback and criticisms on how we do business as a part of our larger organization, and commands can rely on both the goodwill and the first-hand experience of those who call the community home to be effective partners in our mission execution. So there are certain requirements found in Chapter 11 of the Public Affairs Manual that talks about what needs to happen in order to have your own social media website, such as Facebook, etc. So all sites must comply with these requirements. Sites that cannot be brought into the compliance or that fail to meet the requirements will be permanently removed. All Coast Guard social media sites must be registered with Commandant CG 092, and Command shall update their registration when their designated social media spokesperson changes. So there are some requirements on comments and what kind of comments can and cannot be made on your Facebook or social media pages, and whether or not you can and cannot delete such comments. Believe it or not, you can actually delete comments that the general public puts on there. The official Coast Guard comment policy shall be clearly posted on all official social media and blog sites, which outlines public engagement expectations and the manner in which comments are reviewed, moderated, and responded to. Commands can contact their servicing public affairs officer or Commandant CG 092 for a copy of the policy. Comments shall be moderated prior to posting whenever the technology on the site allows. If the technology does not allow it, comments shall be regularly reviewed to ensure compliance with the comment policy. If comments violate the comment policy, they should not be posted or may be deleted upon the discretion of the command. And then comments submitted on official sites or in connection with the transaction of public business may There are good prep tools for the good prep. Sure. So I don't really know too much about it, Nick, but the Coast Guard can and cannot delete such comments. Believe it or not, you can actually delete comments that the general public puts on there. The official Coast Guard comment policy shall be clearly posted on all official social media and blog sites, which outlines public engagement expectations and the manner in which comments are reviewed, moderated, and responded to. Commands can contact their servicing public affairs officer or Commandant CG 092 for a copy of the policy. Comments shall be moderated prior to posting whenever the technology on the site allows. If the technology does not allow it, comments shall be regularly reviewed to ensure compliance with the comment policy. If comments violate the comment policy, they should not be posted or may be deleted upon the discretion of the command. And then comments submitted on official sites or in connection with the transaction of public business may become a federal record, and a copy shall be retained per the records retention policy before deletion or removal from the site. So you can't have a Facebook site. Work with your district public affairs office. Make sure that whoever's running your site is registered with Commandant 092, and that if that person changes, that you're updating them. And remember that whatever you're posting on your unit's Facebook page represents not just you as the OIC, but also your unit and the Coast Guard as a whole. So that's all I really have for tonight. If nobody has any questions, I will sign off, but I'll give you a couple minutes for some questions here. Sure. So I don't really know too much about it, Nick, but the Coast Guard Cool website, are you talking about the getting your certificates and licenses? So I'll address both those. Okay, so the Coast Guard Cool website, all I really know is that during the town hall with the commandant and with the MCPOG the other night. The other day, they talked about the accreditation for getting your licenses based on what you've done in the Coast Guard. Master Chief said it's not online quite yet, but if you go on there and mess around with the Coast Guard Cool website, start playing with it, and it'll give you an idea of what's coming out. Honestly, I'm not probably the best person to ask, Nick, because I have not gone to the website yet and played with it, but that's what I would do, is go on the Coast Guard, Google Coast Guard Cool, and start playing with it and look at it. But I know, like, for Bosn mates, they're looking to give you, like, your captain's license based on your experience in the Coast Guard and things like that. So, sorry, I don't know more. William, yes, that was me. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. So, FORSCOM inspections, any unit that's been shifted to BPR, there is no longer a FORSCOM inspection for you. Somehow I skipped that in my notes here, but so your FORSCOM inspection used to be a great tool to really judge how your XPO is doing, which would check like all your SSIC files, all of your PR folders, all of your your analysis program, government travel charge card program, all of that stuff. A lot of that stuff has shifted to, all of your property stuff, all of that has shifted to the sector base level now under BPR. So the XPOs are not really dealing with that so much, so there's not a lot of reason for a FORSCOM inspection to come to the small units and take care of that. So they have stopped doing that if you've shifted to BPR, but I do think it's a good idea to still reach out to your sector and maybe ask the sector SKs or the sector yeoman to come down and maybe do a spot check and help your XPO, especially if you have a new XPO, it's their first time, and just say, hey, they need some guidance, or can you check up on this or whatever, just to give them some training and some guidance. But don't worry about the FORSCOM inspection. You can still get on the FORSCOM website and look at that inspection if you're worried about it, but for the most part, it's a thing of the past for us OICs. So, other than the OIC review board, do you shipmates also think there are good prep tools for the service-wide, reserve service-wide? I would say go to the LMS and download all of the EPQs and RPQs and start with that. That's what I use to study for the service-wide. You're welcome, William. Read the references, Paul, for all the EPQs and RPQs, and start making study guides. Stay off Quizlet. Don't study other people's study stuff. Make your own. Anybody else? Master Chief Kirby's on here. Ask her. She was on here. I'm not sure if she's still on here. You guys are absolutely welcome. Good luck to everybody. Take a mock board. If you haven't signed up already, strongly recommend it. Think we got room for one more? Does that mean, Nick? One more candidate for mock boards? All right, I'm signing off. You guys have a good night.